Bond hits an all-time high. Roger Moore is Ian Fleming's James Bond 007 in
Despite not being as financially successful as Moonraker, For Your Eyes Only remained a box office success and continued to ensure James Bond's place in film history. As with other Bond films before it, it only made sense to continue the legacy of the franchise with yet another film. But this time, things would be a bit different than usual. The year 1983 would see the release of not one, but two Bond films. One officially produced by Eon Productions with Roger Moore at the forefront, and the other from an entirely different company with none other than Sean Connery back in the role that turned him into a star. After years of legal wrangling behind the scenes, Kevin McClory was granted the rights to readapt Thunderball to the big screen and began to do so shortly after For Your Eyes Only released. The competition for box office supremacy reached a fever pitch, with both films vying for audiences' attention, beginning with the first release in the form of the new Eon-produced film, Octopussy.
the newest and most exciting of all the James Bond thrillers. Step on it. This Bond tops them all. Roger Moore is Ian Fleming's James Bond 007 in Octopussy.
I'm Octopussy, Octopussy, Octopussy.
Yes, you heard that title right, Octopussy. The first time I heard that title, I couldn't stop giggling. After I got over my laughing fit, I started to wonder where, how, and why that title came to be in the first place. As it turns out, the title comes from an actual short story written by Ian Fleming, featured in one of his many collections. It still sounds ridiculous today, but it makes sense if you think about it from Fleming's point of view. Besides, it's not the first time we've heard that word before. Despite the filmmakers searching for a new actor to play Bond at this point, Roger Moore was brought back once again, as it was thought he'd help the film to stand up against the Connery-led Never Say Never Again. As with most other Bond films, the original plot from the novel is almost entirely dispensed with, while retaining a few elements here and there. It was the first Bond film to take place in India, and I always thought it was weird that it took so long for the country to be used as a setting. It just seems like the perfect place for Bond to travel to. In fact, Moonraker was planned to feature India as a location as well, but it ended up being ditched due to time and budget constraints as a result of the advanced special effects. Visually speaking, Octopussy is far more interesting than the previous film, but it also exacerbates a lot of the flaws that continue to pervade throughout much of Moore's Bond film catalog.
Having problems keeping it up, kid?
Experimental model.
I'm not gonna lie, as far as opening scenes are concerned, this is probably my favorite in all of Moore's films. It shows Bond exploring a South American military base in disguise as he goes about gathering clues for his mission and attempting to plan a bomb. It's classic spy detective work, and of course it's always made better when there's a pretty lady involved. Naturally, Bond's fake mustache doesn't cut it as his disguise is blown, and he gets captured before he's escorted out of the base. As he's being driven out of the area, his partner appears to save the day by employing her weapons of mass seduction, giving Bond the opportunity to fend off the goons and hop onto her vehicle. But the fun doesn't stop there. Bond's done horsing around. Now he means business. He hops onto a mini-plane in the tow-behind trailer and takes off, while making the military look like idiots. The stunt work for this plane chase is impressive, to put it mildly, made all the more intense by a military missile tracking behind Bond as he flies. There's more than enough miniature sets and smoke and mirror effects to satisfy any die-hard traditional effects purists. The best example is when Bond flies into the air hangar. Obviously they couldn't fly an actual plane inside a hangar for fear of causing an accident. The way they achieved this effect was attaching a polearm between a model of the plane itself and an old Jaguar car stripped down to its chassis. I always wondered as a kid how they were able to pull this off, and even years later you can barely even notice the pole unless you pause and freeze frame it. The whole thing is capped off beautifully with the most glorious explosion you've ever seen on a model miniature. Boom! This goes to show that you don't need computers for your effects to be special. And whoops, I almost forgot about the one-liner at the end.
Fill her up, please.
The opening title sequence begins right after this, and at this point, I have to say, I'm really sick of the slow, sappy themes we've been getting to this point. The theme this time is All Time High, performed by Rita Coolidge. I guess a theme with the name Octopussy would have been a little too tricky to write up lyrics for. Anyway, this is probably the most boring of all the Bond themes. I mean, it's nice that John Barry is back again for the soundtrack, and the performance itself is fine and all, but why oh why do we keep getting ballads? This sounds like a song I'd hear on an infomercial for a retirement home. It's a little ridiculous that the last fast-paced song we've had was 9 years ago in The Man with the Golden Gun. We all know how much that song sucks. It's actually hilarious to see a film like this to go from 100 to 0 in intensity in the span of just a few minutes. This theme is about as sleep-inducing as it gets. Boring. Next. After that snooze fest, we get another opening scene, this time more related to the plot of the film, and the first time I can recall seeing another 00 agent after the meeting scene from Thunderball. Agent 009 is seen in a weird clown getup trying to escape from East Berlin to the west while being hunted by a pair of knife-wielding twins. I actually almost started to feel sorry for the poor guy until his balloons get popped and end up revealing his location. Come on, man, you didn't think to grab one of those knives and snip those things off before you ran for your life? 009 ends up meeting his maker through a knife to the back, but he manages to limp his way to a dinner party hosted by the British ambassador before keeling over and dying while revealing a fake Fabergé egg. Naturally, MI6 suspects Soviet forces to be involved in his murder and orders James Bond to investigate the matter. This is the first film in the series to feature M since Bernard Lee passed away in 1981, with the character simply mentioned as being on leave in For Your Eyes Only. This time, M is played by Robert Brown, who played a minor background character in The Spy Who Loved Me, and would go on to play the role of M in the rest of the 1980s Bond films. He informs Bond that an auction is being held at Sotheby's, an idea that is referenced from a Fleming short story and cutely mentioned by name in the film The Property of a Lady. He must switch the real Fabergé egg at the auction with the fake so that he could potentially identify the man responsible for 009's death.
I think Commander Bond should accompany you to the sale.
Splendid. I could use an extra pair of eyes. Perhaps we could try and spot the seller. They usually turn up out of interest or perhaps just to bump up the price.
Thank you, Fanning.
Not at all.
Bond's investigation quickly leads him to an exiled Afghan prince named Kamal Khan, played by famed French actor Louis Jourdan. His evil plan is rather complex, at least in terms of scope when compared to the previous film. He works in close cooperation with a Soviet general named Orlov, played by Steven Burkov. Orlov smuggles priceless Soviet jewelry and artifacts to Khan and replaces them with fake copies in their original depository. In exchange, Khan assists Orlov's plot to force nuclear disarmament in the West by attempting to detonate a nuclear bomb inside a US Air Force base in West Germany using a traveling circus show so that he can take over Europe. Don't worry, we're going to talk about that in a bit. I have to say, I'm a bit mixed with Khan's portrayal in this film. To start, he bears no resemblance to anyone I'd see resembling Afghan heritage. Sure, he wears lots of fancy clothes and has some rather eclectic taste when it comes to food, but at the end of the day, it's still a French dude playing dress-up. Even as far back as Dr. No with Joseph Wiseman in the title role, they at least attempted to make him look like he came from Chinese heritage, not just with the wardrobe, but also with makeup effects. Despite the visual inconsistencies though, I have to admit that Jourdan is a blast to watch perform the role. You can tell he had a lot of fun with his performance and he really hams it up as a villain, which could be tacky, but I'd rather see someone exaggerate the role than someone who bores me with it. Plus he has so many great lines of dialogue they rival even those of James Bond.
Who is he?
Englishman, likes eggs, preferably Fabergé, and dice, preferably loaded.
Mr. Bond is indeed a very rare breed, soon to be made extinct.
You have a nasty habit of surviving.
Well, you know what they say about the fittest?
He's also accompanied by a number of interesting associates, starting with his henchman Gobinda, performed by Kabir Bedi. He's similar to Jaws in terms of his imposing stature, but unlike him, he has a few bits of dialogue here and there, and also acts as an authority figure commanding other goons around him. I like how intelligent he is as a villain. He always notices when something isn't right, and does his best to investigate whatever sounds off on his radar. His interactions with Bond are pretty funny too. He's the perfect contrast to Roger Moore's version, as Gobinda's seriousness clashes with Bond's aloofness on multiple occasions. As far as I'm aware, Gobinda's name itself is not mentioned in the film, similar to Kissy Suzuki in You Only Live Twice, which is annoying to think about, but Gobinda is way more memorable by comparison. While we're leaning into the subject of Bond girls, let's talk about another associate. Christina Wayborn plays Magda, another subordinate of Khan's, basically being a femme fatale to do his dirty work. Despite her association with Khan though, I never got the impression they truly work together. Like Gobinda, she's intelligent and knows when Bond is up to something, but doesn't go out of her way to report him to the villain, likely due to Bond's mojo he imparts in every woman he sleeps with. Seriously, what's his secret? There's not really much to say about Magda. She does some neat physical stunts here and there, but that's about it. Not great, but not particularly memorable either.
May I join you? The Sotheby's. £500,000.
The man at the auction.
Precisely.
You have a very good memory for faces.
And figures.
The main Bond girl of the film happens to be the central figure of the plot and is performed by a familiar face. Bond's journey finds him infiltrating a floating palace while searching for info on Khan, which is owned by the titular character Octopussy, performed by Maud Adams, making this her second appearance as a Bond girl after Anders in The Man with the Golden Gun. She works as a businesswoman on the surface, managing a traveling circus show across Europe. Beyond this, she manages the octopus cult, consisting entirely of women, and has a mutual business arrangement with Khan to smuggle jewelry across international borders in exchange for money. However, she ends up being betrayed by Khan and starts to develop an affinity for Bond at the same time. I like that the filmmakers established a personal connection between Bond and Octopussy from the outset. She explains to Bond that her father was to be arrested by him for treason, but he allowed him to commit suicide rather than face a humiliating trial in court. For this, Octopussy offers her thanks and hospitality, permitting him to stay as a guest at her palace. Aside from the history between them, Octopussy is a pretty standard Bond girl with an unusual aura of mystery. Her identity is obscured from view in the first third of the film, and her eventual appearance is built up throughout this time. But I don't understand the significance of this. It's not like she appeared in a previous Bond film, unless you count Maud Adams' appearance in The Man with the Golden Gun, and that was in a different role. Why bother building up anticipation for this character when we already don't know who she is to begin with? At least with Ernst Blofeld, we knew he was the mastermind of Spectre, and his role as such kept audiences invested in waiting to find out what he looked like across multiple films, culminating in You Only Live Twice. Here, it's just a jewelry thief managing a circus show. Not quite as mind-blowing in comparison. In all honesty, Adams is great in the role. She plays a character who's confident in her abilities and lives life on her own terms outside of government rule. I just find it weird to see how the filmmakers built this unnecessary aura of mystery around her. That, and her name, still makes me cringe.
You left me to be killed along with thousands of innocent people.
Octopussy. Octopussy.
Ew. Alright, time to talk about the things Octopussy gets right. As per usual, the action scenes are top-notch. A lot of these sequences use vehicles, a prime example of which is the buggy chase in the streets of India. Bond attempts to escape Gobinda while partnered with MI6 operative Vijay, performed by former pro tennis player Vijay Amritraj. Apart from all the amazing crashes and special effects in place, there's just so many little touches that make it fantastic. You've got a fake-out stabbing scene where Bond narrowly avoids death, Vijay using a tennis racket to fend off goons, and Gobinda using a freaking blunderbuss. I mean, seriously, how cool is that? All of these things are accentuated by the Indian locales everyone breezes through. Coming off of the dullness of the last film, it's really nice to see so many colors on the screen this time around, not just in the chase itself, but throughout the rest of the film in general. I find Octopussy to be more realistic than For Your Eyes Only in this regard, because you actually get to see real people interacting in real settings, rather than just actors LARPing on a set. There's even a funny unscripted moment where you can see a civilian ride a bike between Bond and the enemy's vehicles. The action doesn't stop there though. Bond continues this craziness on a train and even on a plane in mid-flight. The craftsmanship put into these sequences is amazing. From Bond dodging Gobinda's saber on the coach rooftop to hanging on for dear life on the roof of a turning plane, you're always on the edge of your seat. Realism is nice in small doses, but it's still an action film, and at the end of the day, you just gotta have some action. One of Roger Moore's stunt doubles became severely injured while filming the scene where he climbs on the side of one of the coaches. Learning about this made me appreciate the work of stuntmen and traditional effects artists a lot more, and how much they put themselves at risk, all for the sake of our entertainment. Despite these scenes being incredibly entertaining, some of my favorite scenes in this film have no action at all. There's two in particular where Bond really gets under Khan's skin and just leaves me grinning ear to ear. The first is when Bond attends the Sotheby's auction for the Fabergé egg, and he actually participates in the bidding just so he can force Khan to spend more money than he wants to. It's a classic scene that shows what kind of a troll Bond can be when he wants to be. The second scene where this sort of thing happens is when Bond arrives in India and plays a game of backgammon with Khan at his hotel. He suspects Khan to be cheating with the previous player and engages in a game of wits with him in the following game. This scene is a masterclass in atmosphere. The dialogue exchange between Bond and Khan is some of the best of Roger Moore's era. It immediately establishes the pair as enemies to each other. The cherry on top is when Bond borrows Khan's loaded dice in order to win the game. I still laugh at the sheer smugness displayed on Bond's behalf.
I prefer cash.
Get it cashed for him.
Yes, sir.
Spend the money quickly, Mr. Bond.
I intend to. Kamal Khan.
But as you know by now, there is no Bond film without flaws, and Octopussy is no exception. Of all of Moore's films, this one's story is the one I feel that makes the least amount of sense. I don't understand how Orlov's plan is supposed to work. I suppose I can understand wanting to detonate a bomb inside a US Air Force base in the first place, but the whole political angle behind it is ridiculous. The idea is that world powers would assume the explosion originated from an American bomb, assume a missile wouldn't have launched or been picked up in other countries' radars, and assume NATO would call for immediate denuclearization. Orlov's grand plan is basically one big assumption that everything will play out as it should. Why would he just assume that NATO countries would readily give up all their nuclear weapons because of one supposed accident? If anything, I think it would put any other neighboring country on red alert and ready to use their nuclear weapons on incoming threats if necessary. Even the whole idea of nuclear bombs and Russians behind them is annoying because it's so played out at this point. There's many older films in the series that use these same concepts and do them much better than Octopussy does. It's a shame because you can tell they were trying to go somewhere with it. General Gogol, who only appeared in a scene or two in each film since The Spy Who Loved Me, has a more active role in this film as he tries to wrestle with Orlov's politics behind the scenes. If they had just stuck to detonating the bomb and not tack some dumb European invasion plot on top of it, I think the story would have been easier to follow along with.
General, excuse me, I have some travel arrangements to make. Enjoy the show.
Thank you.
I'm sure the General will get a big blast out of this.
I know he won't be disappointed.
Of course, no Roger Moore Bond film is complete without some degree of campy nonsense. This is one thing I definitely didn't miss from For Your Eyes Only. Like I said in the past, there's nothing wrong with having a few silly things here and there. After all, it's a Bond film, and they're supposed to be entertaining, right? Some of the campy things in this film are okay, like when Q raids Khan's palace in a hot air balloon along with Magda's circus crew. I have no idea why this old geezer is flying in the middle of a combat zone, but it's hilarious, so I'll take it. The best part is when Q bumps a goon in the noggin and he gets showered with a ton of affection.
What are you doing? Yeah, cut it out. We haven't time for that. Later, perhaps.
Apart from this and some of the one-liners, these moments are few and far between. Bond wears more dumb costumes in this film than any other I can think of. He wears the getup of one of the knife-wielding twins from earlier for a good chunk of the final act, a gorilla suit in order to stay hidden in a room, and of course the infamous clown costume covered from head to toe in makeup and drab. You can argue that Bond needs these disguises in order to stay hidden and accomplish the mission, but this doesn't make it any less absurd. Even in Diamonds Are Forever with its outrageously campy vibe, Bond still wore a traditional disguise when he had to. I wouldn't even mind so much if the film was more lighthearted in nature, but seeing a 00 agent like Bond being reduced to this level of literal circus comedy is just sad to see. There are plenty of examples of disguises being used in other Bond films without turning Bond into an actual clown. These gags cheapen whatever effect is trying to be conveyed with a potential nuclear threat at stake. Oh, by the way, Bond is apparently Tarzan. Oh, that's so dumb. Octopussy represents another mediocre stamp in the Bond film franchise. It's surrounded with beautiful locales and action set pieces that perfectly exemplify what we expect from the world of James Bond, but it ends up being hampered by the same boring plot and same unfunny comedy we've seen in other Moore films to this point. That's not to say Octopussy is a terrible film. There's still a lot of fun to be had where it counts, but it falls into the same trap that The Man with the Golden Gun did. It treads new ground in a new setting with the same old pair of shoes. It's the same old thing we've come to expect, with less enthusiasm. This is where I started to notice how tired the franchise was getting. It doesn't help that Moore was rapidly beginning to show his age as the years went on and the films progressed in number. Even his charisma seems to be lesser than what it used to be. Technically, I feel that Moore should have left before this film was made, as the new actor may have given an injection of inspiration to the character and helped keep things more lively. But even so, a new actor likely wouldn't have helped with the problems already present in the script. It's not a bad Bond film, but it's not particularly good either. It's stuck squarely in middle ground territory, leaning toward the bad side of things. Of all of Roger Moore's Bond films, this is the one I recommend the least to casual viewers of the series. But don't worry, the next film in Moore's catalog represents an all-time high for the series, or low, depending on how you think about it.
I wish.
What?
I wish you weren't in such a weakened condition. Oh, James! James!
Now, normally this is where I'd end things and invite viewers to check out my future videos, but I'm aware that people are probably wondering what my thoughts are on Never Say Never Again, which, as I mentioned, was released the same year as Octopussy was. Even though it's little more than a remake of a previous film and isn't involved with the official Bond series in any way, I guess I should talk about it a little bit and explain my thoughts on it. I find it fascinating that this film exists to begin with. The fact that Kevin McClory was able to legally produce a Bond film on his own accord is curious by itself, but bringing back Sean Connery to the role 12 years later is just downright impressive. For me, however, this is where the impressiveness ends.
Oh! How reckless of me. I made you all wet.
Yes, but my martini's still dry. My name's James.
First of all, it's interesting to see Connery back in the role for the 7th and final time, not just because he's Bond again, but also in the way he's portrayed. Obviously, the film had to be made in a way that accommodated his age, having been 53 years old at the time it was released. As such, this time Bond is portrayed as more of an aging hero encroaching retirement rather than the fit middle-aged man he usually was. There are other aspects that reflect this change in the times, such as M's disregard for the 00 section and Q's reduced budgets. I'll admit that this is a unique take as far as how Bond is presented, but in the end, the story isn't anything different than usual. As far as the actor himself is concerned, there's not much to say. It's just Sean Connery being Sean Connery. He's older and slower than usual, of course, and his accent is noticeably thicker this time around, but he's still got the moves even more than a decade since his last official appearance, as well as one last collection of one-liners.
Mr. Bond, I need a urine sample. If you could fill this beaker for me.
From here?
You affect me, James.
Well, that's bad. Going down, one should always be relaxed. My name is Bond.
Oh, you're Mr. Bond. I believe I'm having you in half an hour.
Oh, splendid. Your room or mine?
Aside from the themes relating to age and disillusionment, nothing has really changed. It's more or less the same plot as Thunderball, with a 1980s themed coat of paint. Connery is the only returning actor from the original film, with everyone else from MI6 staff to the villains being performed by different actors, one of them being future Johnny English himself, Rowan Atkinson. Ernst Blofeld also makes an appearance as he did in Thunderball, but in a more official capacity. We get to see more of Spectre in their quarters this time around, as they plot with Largo to steal nuclear artillery and use them to hold a random city in the world hostage. At the same time, Bond is ordered to go to the Shrublands clinic as he did in the previous film for the dumbest reason possible. Take a guess. Seriously, I just want you to take a guess on what the reason is. PTSD? No. Grievous physical injury? No. Vodka addiction? No. It's because of free radicals.
Too many free radicals, that's your problem.
Free radicals, sir?
Yeah, they're toxins that destroy the body and the brain. caused by eating too much red meat and white bread and too many dry martinis.
Then I shall cut out the white bread, sir.
You'll do more than that, 007.
Who the hell does this M think he is, a doctor? I miss the old M who used to drink indifferently blended brandy with Bond. He would never say something like that. But that's not even the worst of the MI6 staff. Take a look at how Q is portrayed.
Good to see you, Mr. Bond. Things have been awfully dull round here. Bureaucrats running the old place, everything done by the book. Can't make a decision unless the computer gives you the go-ahead. Now you're on this. I hope we're going to have some gratuitous sex and violence.
Oh my god, Q, what have they done to you? I can't believe how bastardized all the characters are in this film. It's like the only thing this film thinks we want is bad guys getting shot and Bond getting laid. And you know what? That's what a lot of this film is. A few action set pieces mixed in with Bond shagging a lot of women, one scene of which goes in way more detail than I'd like to see, and it goes on for a full minute. In between these ridiculous scenarios is the same recycled plot we've seen in Thunderball before. Bond finds a Spectre plot in the clinic, travels to look for Largo, encounters resistance, overcomes resistance, and saves the day with yet another new Felix Leiter. If you thought the original Thunderball was boring in a few parts, then you'll be happy to know that Never Say Never Again stays boring the entire time outside of the action scenes. Even in spite of its mediocrity, I can watch Octopussy multiple times and still enjoy the overall experience, but I struggle to stay awake even within half an hour of this film going. The whole thing feels like it's running on cruise control with all the exposition that's thrown about. There's no sense of playfulness or fun or any energy at all. And when there are unique things that do happen, it just feels strange and out of place. I'd rather see Bond play backgammon for an hour than watch him play some cheesy non-existent video game, and this is coming from a lifelong gamer. There are a few things that stand out in a positive way, I guess. The setting and environments around Bond are all competently filmed. The film was directed by Irvin Kershner, best known for directing the Star Wars film The Empire Strikes Back, and he adds some nice visual flair to the shots where he can. Barbara Carrera makes for a great henchwoman in the form of Fatima Blush, in the same vein as Fiona Volpe in the original. She has a lot of interactions with Bond, and it's cool to see them compete with each other, even if she acts like a complete lunatic.
You know that making love to Fatima was the greatest pleasure of your life?
Well, to be perfectly honest, there was this girl in Philadelphia.
Shut up! I am the best.
Yes. Yes, you're right. In fact, I was going to put you in my memoirs as #1.
Right.
Other than that, it's completely pedestrian, at best. I'm not against remakes when done right, but this film was made purely to compete with the official Bond series without thinking about why people love the franchise to begin with. Seeing the film open with 007 logos sprawled across the screen tells you everything you need to know. McClory cared more about making money through his obsession with the character than about actually making an entertaining film. The end result is one of the most soulless husks of a film I've had the displeasure of watching, one that I can't recommend watching in good conscience. The saddest part about all this is that McClory couldn't let go of the franchise after this film's release. He continued for decades to try and readapt Thunderball, and threatened lawsuits anytime he felt the official franchise was encroaching on his ideas. He kept coming up with increasingly ridiculous titles like Warhead, Atomic Warfare, and Warhead AD 2000. Woo! He would continue to repeatedly lobby producers to back his one and only project of value to no avail. The idea of seeing one remake of a Bond film is insane, let alone multiple remakes of the same film. What was he hoping to accomplish by doing this? Did he really think people would be interested in seeing the same Bond film over and over again? Kevin McClory caught lightning in a bottle once in the 1960s and released it along with this film, never able to recapture it again. The themes of age and disillusionment in this film are oddly appropriate because they perfectly encapsulate Kevin McClory's behavior as a person. I hate ending on such a negative note, so I'll say this much. His legacy in film will forever serve as an example of dogged determination and passion to see something through to the end. However, it will also serve as a cautionary tale to future filmmakers that sometimes things don't always work out as you expect, and sometimes it's just better to say, never again.
Sorry, Mr. Bond. Obviously caught you at a bad moment.
M sent you.
Only to plead for your return, sir. M says that without you in the service, he fears for the security of the civilized world.
Never again.
Never?
Never, never say never again. Never, never say never again.
This concludes my review of both Octopussy and Never Say Never Again. Thank you for watching this video, I hope you enjoyed it, and as always, stay tuned for the next part.
Roger Moore in his newest James Bond adventure, hitting an all-time high in Octopussy.
Yes, well, I mean, it's one has done enough and lived enough and seen enough. But I must say, nobody ever believed it was going to go when I started in 1962. And it's 30 years next month, eh? that it would last that long. But the idea and any of the skills that one put into playing it, the real secret was attempting to make it look easier than it really was. And I think that if anything's come out of it is just to prove that it isn't as easy as it looks.
Can I ask you how you would like to be remembered? Do you care?
No.